All right, this is Jim Brooks for WBRT. I'd like to welcome our special studio guest, Congressman Brett Guthrie. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. It's always great to be here.
Well, it's great that you took time out of your busy day to stop in. Now, I know that your previous stop is actually related to some legislation that you had sponsored. You were over at Court Physical Therapy.
I was at Court Physical Therapy, and it's one of these things like when you run for office or things that we talk about we want to do and accomplish, rebuild the military, international affairs, the things that we're doing. But there are all these little issues that just kind of surface that you end up dealing with that you just don't foresee coming. And one was I got contacted, and it's true. So every healthcare professional is licensed within a state.
Right.
So let's say you're the University of Kentucky's. I use that as an example on my house floor. People say, "Are you just a UK fan?" I said, "No, but I think UK has the best chance to go to the Final Four. More of a hilltopper than anybody. I like UK too, but you can't win, right? You can't win by bringing anything up." But so if you're a physician or any kind of healthcare professional that's licensed in Kentucky and you travel with UK, so this spring when I said on the floor, when UK goes to the Final Four in Minneapolis, the physician working on only UK players until this bill is passed would not be operating under the outside of their license,
right,
because they're not in Kentucky.
Right.
And so we thought that's the Commerce Clause. I'm a strong believer in the 10th Amendment and states' rights. But when someone is traveling with their team, taking care of their player, now if he or she shows up in Minneapolis and says, "I want to go practice at the Mayo Clinic,"
sure,
that's a different story. But if they're taking care of their players, so the problem is they wouldn't be under their malpractice insurance. Their malpractice could say you're operating without the scope of your license. And just think, particularly if you're with the UK men's basketball team, and you do something and a player turns out to say, some of those young men are going to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Sure.
And so there's some economic claim to that. So we have a bill. We passed the House. It's passed the Senate. It came back to the House. We amended it again to send to the Senate to put some other things, actually not related to the bill, the Senate requested, so we could get actually it's going to have FAA reauthorization. So if the President doesn't sign this by the end of the week, then air traffic controllers won't be able to go to work. So, which is not related to sports medicine, it's just the way the Senate does business sometimes. But it guarantees the President's going to sign the bill, so I expect it to be in full place in time for UK to go to the Final Four. Well, because the thing is, if you're because they said, why don't you just get licensed in all the other states? But if you're an SEC team and you say, okay, we'll get licensed in the SEC states because we're going to play there every year, we're going to play there. But do you have Final Fours in Minnesota? Do you have them in California? You have the classics in Hawaii, and so you need to be. It needs to travel with you. If you're traveling with your team, taking over your team, you need to be covered.
Right. I wasn't aware of this. My wife's a physical therapist, licensed in Kentucky, and her malpractice is in Kentucky.
But if she traveled with a sports team and got sued, then she would be out of her.
Right. She's operating outside.
Yeah. When this first came to my attention, I had a friend who's a team doctor at Auburn, and sorry, I got a little cold here. A team doctor at Auburn, and he was traveling with Cam Newton. And to think about the liability if something had gone wrong there.
Right.
And so they were in the Rose Bowl one year, and he was out in California. So I joked with him. I said the next year at least they were at the Hall of Fame game in Birmingham. So Auburn did him a favor by going to the Hall of Fame game instead of the Rose Bowl because he was practicing within his license. But those are the kind of things that sometimes just pop up that need to be fixed. And what's interesting, those kind of things are almost always bipartisan, almost always get close to unanimous vote. And people don't really understand that we just fight over everything. But a lot of these kind of issues, they just get taken care of.
Right, and this even filters down to the local level, say a high school team that's playing out of state.
Well, Bethlehem goes to play some team in Indiana, and that covers them now. It will cover them as well.
Right, and then of course, Court is big in sports therapy and athletic trainers, and so that
because a lot of public schools play each other, but some of the Catholic schools or private schools will travel to play other schools similarly situated. I'm not sure Bethlehem's schedule, but that would be more typical, particularly if you're like St. X and you're on the Indiana border anyway. Now a lot of those physicians may also be dual licensed, but they're covered now.
All right, moving on, some legislation you sponsored, got the name of it, the opioid recovery and treatment legislation. Margie and I on our show have done a series of interviews with individuals involved everywhere from initial intake through treatment and even first responders who are dealing with this on the streets every day. And it
Right.
certainly is an epidemic.
It is an epidemic, and a lot of it started with OxyContin, and people who weren't necessarily misbehaving or in the counterculture, and they were people that were injured, and you get from high school kids tearing ACLs playing soccer to there was a story of someone who hurt their back as a prison guard and started taking OxyContin because of the pain and got addicted. And so, but it's all strata, it's all society, it's everywhere. And so when it first came out, it was advertised that OxyContin, because of one footnote in a journal of medicine, that's why it's important to the point. One footnote in a journal of medicine said, if you take OxyContin and you're truly injured, you can't get addicted. That's wrong. So I'm just quoting the footnote. That's absolutely false, and I would recommend no one take OxyContin unless you just can't survive without it. Because it is very addictive. And the people who made OxyContin advertised that, this is the new, because they could quote this journal. And so it's just overwhelmed, particularly Appalachia, not just Appalachia, Kentucky, I mean from New Hampshire, Vermont, all the way down through Birmingham and all through the I-75 corridor through Florida. It's everywhere now, but that's where it really hit the most. And so we were looking at how do you come up with comprehensive solutions? There's a couple of things that I actually had provisions in the bill. So we looked at a lot of us, the House passed over 50-something bills related directly to opioid legislation. The Senate, because of its rule that if one senator objects, then you have to go through 30 hours of debate, and the debate goes until 60 votes are called. So but the Senate could really only pass 1 or 2 bills because at the same time, they're having to do 30 hours of debate on because the Democrats are forcing the Republicans to do 30 minutes of debate on every single presidential appointment. So the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture for Personnel gets a whole week on the House floor, and so it just comes up. That's what they're doing. They're coming up the legislative process. So what the Senate chose to do, and in support because we need it done, is take all of our bills and put them into the ones that they passed, put them into one package. So the two that I actually were able to get into the bill, one was maternal health, and so we're seeing a lot of young babies are born with opioid addiction, and so there was a study by the National Institutes of Health. So we direct that so we're talking about information flow. The National Institutes of Health, and I'm one that's talked about government agencies and so forth, but I'll tell you, this one is, they research, it's professionally run. A guy named Dr. Francis Collins runs it, who's led the project on the genome. I saw him not long ago, so you realize in 100 years people are going to talk about you like we do Jonas Salk, because of what all is coming from brain research, from DNA and the stuff that he leads. But they put together a package of recommendations, and so one bill is just really directing the Health and Human Services Secretary to implement all the recommendations and stuff like, if a mother does have pain, a pregnant lady has pain, how do you treat, what should you treat for pain? If they are addicted, before they leave the hospital, they have to have certain types of information. So what we kind of switched, I think Tennessee's one of the states, if a baby is born addicted, then the mother can be criminally held liable. And understand why people, because obviously the mother's put the baby's life in danger by her actions. But what we want to do is not have mothers keep it under the rug because they're afraid they're going to come out and say, okay, this is my situation, this is where I am, don't hold me liable, let me deal with it. And so that's kind of the idea behind that bill. So let's deal with the mother's addiction, deal with the disease, deal with the baby, and not have it kind of swept under the rug for fear of federal prosecution. So that kind of addresses that. The second thing is recovery. And you get this is something I've really learned. I fortunately haven't been through this with an immediate family member. A lot of people have, but just studying it is that typically someone will go to a recovery center based on word of mouth. And there are some really good ones around here. There's one that I visited recently around here that does the faith-based. So it's like the 12-step, and it works for some people. There's another one that's called medical-assisted treatment, which is like methadone, buprenorphine, and it gives you just enough of satisfaction to keep your body from wanting more. So you're kind of medically induced, I guess, moving forward. And there's another, it's actually medicine, it's called Vivitrol, that actually blocks the receptors of the brain from wanting an opioid. I wish it would just work for everybody. It doesn't, and that's what we want to see. Does it? Can we get on that path? And but today you get treatment based on where you show up. And 12-step works for some people, buprenorphine works for some people, and Vivitrol works for some people. So we have a grant program that encourages centers to offer all 3 treatments. So somebody shows up at the door, they get assessed, they get put into the treatment that's best for them, not just what the recovery center offers. And all of them believe in the treatment. They're not doing it. There are bad apples in the recovery, in the retreatment center world, a lot of them. I've never seen one around here that I visited, but there is testimony, typically Southern Florida, where you see a lot of that they prey on people who are high income or have good insurance. They'll do anything for their child and get them in there, and we've had testimony to that in Congress. But for the most, everyone I've seen around here is really trying to do the right thing. Just the right thing isn't always for that particular person. And so what they offer is the right thing for that person, I should say. So what we want to do is all 3 treatments. Then the second step, so usually they're in there for 28 to 30 days, and then when they leave, if they go right back to the same friends, the same issues, and then they typically relapse. So then we want to go, all right, sober living. So encourage them to have like a sober living plan. One, I know in Elizabethtown has the in-house treatment, then they have some apartments that they put people in so they can still counsel them and see them and be part of it to get them to change their lifestyle. And the third is job training. And so what we have to do, and I think it's the right time to do it in our economy, because of our booming economy, there are more jobs than people looking. So it's a great opportunity for employers to sit down and say, I need good employees. If you're coming out of treatment, because a lot of people in treatment have felonies. And so the question you get to, are they a criminal who's also an addict? I would, from the testimony I've heard and the things that I've read, most people have criminal behavior because they're addicts. And if you take care of the addiction, you take care of the criminal behavior. And so that's kind of the risk some companies may be more willing to take to give people a second chance and an opportunity. We're hearing it. And if you're in a recovery program, some of these sober living, not mandated in the bill, but most of them are getting urinalysis or tested 2 or 3 times a week. So if I'm an employer or needing a good employee, I've got somebody that almost condition of their sobriety and treatment and maybe parole is they stay sober, they show up for work, they are meaningfully and dutifully employed. And so I think it can offer, more than anything, a great opportunity for that person suffering from the addiction to get back into the workplace, but it gives employers the possibility to have a source of really good employees, and they're both needed. The person recovering needs the job, and the employer needs a good employee. And I think it's a perfect time to do it.
Well, and certainly there's a huge need. I'm assuming across the United States, but I know here in Kentucky too. And I think probably every family in Kentucky has been touched through either a
neighbor, a friend, a family, somebody that you know by first name. And most people have that. Yeah, absolutely.
And anything that can help them return to a better lifestyle is worthwhile. Some legislation that you were part of that kind of hits home with me. Of course, I'm a Hilltopper too.
Right, absolutely.
And I had to borrow some student loan money to finish up my education. And, and I think that, and I have seen myself, people who, students, young people who get into the, and borrow money, student loan, and money and more money, and then just not really sure they're aware of the responsibility they have. And I know that you've been involved in some legislation to educate students, and I applaud that, because I think that people need to understand what they're getting into and the responsibility there, and how to manage X number of dollars of debt.
Right. Well, the biggest issue is the cost of college. And, there's a private college world, and that's one thing. The other is state college. So it's mostly state. There's only a handful of federal colleges, and most of those are free. You just got to sign up to go serve in the military when you're done. But it's state. And I will say, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, our governor and state legislator are trying to deal with what's driving our state budget. I think they put over $3 billion, I think, if I remember, in pensions. Looks like they're going to have another $200 to $300 million just to take care of the Medicaid expansion that was begun under Governor Beshear that they now have to come up with the money for. So in defense of the state legislature, they've got to deal with the pensions and the Medicaid side of it. They've got a lot on their hands, But what those programs, and when they do them that way, that's less money to spend on state. So the cost of state colleges, cost of college has gone up, and everywhere, not just in Kentucky. And so what we were looking at, how do you get a handle just on the student loan? And there's not solid evidence that every time we raise student loans and ability to get money, then colleges raise their price, but there's a correlation there. And so what we're trying to get a handle on that. And so what we saw was Indiana University has a program. Currently, if you're going to get a student loan, or you get a student loan or a Pell Grant or whatever, you get counseling the day you show up on university, and you get counseling the day you leave. So could be 4 years in between. Indiana University said, let's try to solve this problem first. Let's make sure young people make the right decision. Just because you're eligible for $12,000 in loan doesn't mean you need to take out 12. You know, I've heard people say, this is the cheapest money you'll ever have. And it is subsidizing this loan, but you still owe it back. You still owe it back when you're trying to start a career, buy a house, start a family, that kind of time in your life. And so Indiana saw, by having counseling every beginning of the year, every year, and really working through a budget, not just having like, all right, counsel, you sign here, actually working through a budget, that they saw a drop 11%. $31 million less is taken out of loans in Indiana before they started this, given the same number per capita students. And so that's important to do. And so Susan Bonamici, who's a Democrat from Oregon, and I worked together to pass this and have it hopefully get into law, that we're going to have more robust financial counseling for people moving forward. And the bill on opioids that on the recovery centers was done with Gene Green from Houston, a Democrat from Houston. All the bills, I have a bill on apprenticeships, trying to get people back into the workforce. It's done with Susan Davis from California, who's a Democrat. And so when we find these issues we work together on, people think that just nothing gets done bipartisanly. We have, Republican, Democrat co-sponsors. They pass usually over 400 out of 435 votes. We argued and fought, and I would part of it on the tax bill, who should best spend your money, the federal government or yourself, over the health care bill, what's the right mix of government, and I'm more private sector than government. There's some that want all government, but that's an argument, and I think we'd lose our innovation in health care. But that's a debate worth having, and you quite honestly don't find common ground. It's not because you want to be disagreeable, you just disagree.
Right.
And our whole history is fraught with stories of big battles on the House and Senate floor, and eventually our country comes to the right decision. So I'm not apologizing for that. But day-to-day stuff like this gets done bipartisan. We don't get on an elevator and look at each other and snarl. Actually, they did that, not in elevators, but walking down the street in Thomas Jefferson's days, and he made a comment about how people used to be friends when walk across the same side of the street. That's just not, I know that. I talked to Susan Bonamici, and we were kind of joking. I said, nobody's ever called me from Fox to say, why don't you come on and tell how you're working with someone? Nor did she get the same call from MSNBC.
Right.
So at both sides, the controversy is what people watch in the evening.
Right.
And so when you only see that, that's all you think that's happening. So I get it. But a lot of us do work together to get things done.
Well, I wanted to make that point that, of course, we, as a country, we've kind of been absorbed in the Senate confirmation hearings and everything related to that. And I think listeners need to know that government is still functioning.
Well,
and that good work is still going on.
Well, on September, so this is October the 2nd today. On September 30th, the government didn't shut down. Our military is funded for the full year. Our soldiers are getting a 2.6% pay raise. The FAA is going to keep, planes are still flying, and the final bill is going to be signed on Thursday. So yeah, the things that people say, well, your constitutional job is to fund the government and take care of the defense. So we're taking care of that. Now the Senate's constitutional responsibility is advising consent. And so they are going through that process now, which, like I said, we end up with 50 bills in one, because they have this other mission or other responsibility that we don't have, that takes up a lot of time on the Senate floor. But right, so people are watching that, and that's a big issue, and it's something that should be on television every night, I think. But just know that other stuff gets done.
All right, you mentioned the apprenticeship legislation. I know that, of course, I cover the school boards, and I know that locally, at least even on the school board level, they're more interested in getting partnerships with local industry and business to get high school students more involved in the workforce at an earlier age, so they can get a taste of what working in an auto plant is like,
Right.
or these other trades, because not every student is going to go to college and pursue a higher degree. But
Right.
there's plenty of great paying
wonderful
career
job.
paths out there.
Most of this stuff is done at the state and local level. Federal government has a pretty small footprint in this, and it should be done at the state and local level. We're trying to figure out exactly what the roles should be, and even Susan Davis and I working on this together kind of have gone back and forth on what the roles should be. But what I like to see happen, if somebody works for, so I have a business in Bowling Green, and we have to create our own tool and die makers. They're not necessarily journeyman tool and they know how to do tool. They're tool and die makers, but they get paid well, but they can do things they have to do things specifically on our machines, on our dies, on our whatever. And so what we would like to see, the federal role is, what can there not be an apprenticeship program that's recognized, so we can adopt as we're going to train tool and die makers anyway, let's adopt them so they get a skill that if they want to go work in Indiana, if they want to go work in Tennessee, if they want to work somewhere else, or even in Kentucky, but get a skill that will earn them more money, then we got to decide, are we going to pay them more and keep them? Or they're going to go somewhere else and work for more money, and it's just good for if we lose somebody because they're doing better for themselves and their families, that's a good reason to lose somebody. And so that's what we're trying to look at there. But you hit the nail on the head. When I was in high school, shop is what we call it. It really wasn't robust. I mean, most people who were leaving my high school would go work in a big factory, and if it was manually putting screws on a car going down the line, that was what people did. Now a robot does that. But the problem is, you can't get people to fix the robot that does that. And so the person putting screws in a robot was making pretty good money because their bargaining power. But now that's been automated. Not screws are in a car, but the robot, now you got to find somebody to fix that.
Right.
And employers can't find them. They're willing to pay a lot of money for them. You're right, it's a good career. And so I'm glad you're talking about the Bardstown, and I guess the Nelson County School Board are doing that. You see it all over the district, you see it all over the country. The schools are responding to it. Our educators get it. But it's going to take a while. But we've gone from, essentially when I was in high school, which is 30-something years ago, when businesses and big companies kind of quit the tool and die, the journeyman kind of stuff. And so now the people that did it when I was are retiring. And so now we have, it's a skills gap, but it's really a generation gap. And people would say, there's going to be a whole generation that we're going to miss out if we don't continue this. And we're there. We're at that point. And so schools or systems are doing it. EC3 over in Elizabethtown, or it's actually Hardin County school system, but in the Elizabethtown area, is as a whole separate ultra-modern tech school for their high school. Not necessarily for KCTCS, although they worked out a deal. That's what you're seeing now. Not only is it K through 12,
right,
but they're also working with community colleges. I mean, Kentucky's doing it right. We have to do two things. One, we have to get people to show up for the training and people to be inspired by it. And you said it, to let people know working in a factory isn't doing mundane, routine work. That's still there, but that's not the highest paying work. The highest paying work is being able to fix the robots and the computer machining that's coming down the line that replaces them, because you just can't find people to do the routine work. And so, because once you get into a lot of that routine work, you didn't really even have to have a high school diploma to do. And so today, because our schools are are doing so much to keep kids in school, those are kind of on the lower educational level who drop out of school or whatever, they just don't have the skills. They didn't drop out of school like a generation or two ago because they had to go to work for their family. They dropped out of school for a lot of other reasons that you just can't get it. Once you get in the workforce, it just follows you. But the people who are just being missed are the ones who are smart as a whip, but they're not book smart.
right.
But they're smart. They're smarter than people. I always like to say I have to have a refresher course. But if you went to the factory that I worked in, I could out-calculus almost everybody in there. But I couldn't diagram a machine, and I couldn't wire a machine. I couldn't put it forward. And it doesn't make me smarter because I can read a book and do it. It makes us equally on the same level. Whether you do it with your hands or you do it with your brain, you do it all with your brain, And so, but people are just talented. People are absolutely, there's aptitudes. Some people can paint the Sistine Chapel, and some people can look at a machine and know how it ticks and make it work, and they're all valuable.
Well, it's good to know that our government is continuing to function, though sometimes I think, of course, a conflict makes good copy is what they say.
Yeah, making things run on time doesn't, the train showing up at the station when it's supposed to doesn't make news.
Now, I understand you have a daughter who's studying journalism.
She wants to be a journalist. She does, and so she's in college and she's in her junior year.
Oh, okay.
And she's in Chicago at college at Northwestern University in their journalism school.
Awesome.
And she's had some really great experiences. She really enjoys it and loves it, and it's a great city. It's not that far from here. I tell people all the time, it's an easy 6.5 hour. Well, from Bowling Green to here, it probably about 5 to be right downtown. And it's one of those. It's the one city that I've been to a lot of American cities that has the same feel as Manhattan, and you really feel like you're in a big city when you're in Chicago, and it's a great place to be. So I'm not here to. I want people to come to Bardstown and enjoy the local culture. But if you want a big city that's close by, it's a great place to go. And,
absolutely.
But taking the tourism in Bardstown, it's amazing how many people in the DC area now will come to me and talk about coming here for the bourbon tourism, for all the other things that move forward. And I know. I went to a trip to Napa one time. There's a little town there called Yountville that is just stunningly beautiful. Has, I think, the best restaurant in the world called the French Laundry. And I looked around and I thought, that's Bardstown. And as more people come and more tourism is moving in, and, then a couple of new distilleries that are coming into this area. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the local leadership, local chamber, local leadership, industrial development, what they're doing to position. I know Louisville's wanting people to stay downtown and go down the Whiskey Row, but what Bardstown's doing to position itself to be kind of the shining diamond in this trail of people in tourism is to be commendable to your local leadership.
Well, good luck to your daughter, by the way.
Thanks.
Because it can be a thankless job sometimes.
Yes.
Especially if you're in the newspaper business. But I always tell people that there's more demand for news and journalism now than ever. You have so many venues. It's not just newspapers anymore.
Oh, I know.
It's radio, television, internet, podcasts.
When she first got in, we were there and they were trying to get students who were accepted to come. So we all went up there, and it was Peter Alexander went there, who's one of the. I think he'll be the NBC evening news anchor at some point, but on NBC News, and he was talking through video, and he said. I know because it's not a cheap place to go to school. So I think all your parents are going to pay all this money for looks like a trade that's dying, because it's not. There's stories that need to be told. People need to tell them. And he goes, as a matter of fact, it's very entrepreneurial on different sources to get that story out. Whether it's radio, television, cable television moving, newspaper, social media, there's just all kinds of ways to do it. So his argument was there's never a more exciting time, as you just said, to be part of the journalism profession than today.
I agree 100%. Well, Congressman, I know that we're not too many weeks away from the November election.
Yes.
And I know that you've been serving since 2009. It doesn't seem like it's been that long.
Seems like yesterday. It really does.
But you're running for another term.
I am up again, and I would love the opportunity to serve again. I think there's still things, we've done a lot of things. There's some of the things that we're talking about, things that make difference in people's lives, opioids. We've worked on missing exploited children, a bill that we just passed again, that I passed 5 years ago. We in the federal legislature, usually bills have expiration dates, we have to address them. Where in the state it's a little different. So we just did it in working on updating the military. I've been part of a NATO committee to make sure our voice is well spoken and trying to get Europe to pay more for their defense. And fortunately now we have the backing of President Trump. We're getting there with Europe stepping up more. But there's a lot of things that I've accomplished. I feel like I could work with people across the aisle. I think what we found that we all had to start telling people no, because I've had a lot of people on the other side of the aisle come by and say, hey, your office is really good to work with on issues we agree. Like I said, I'm perfectly willing to argue till I'm blue in the face when we don't agree and I believe in a certain way. But when you agree, I don't be disagreeable. So I think that's kind of how we've conducted ourselves in Washington. And we got a lot to do. The biggest thing we still have left on the table is our debt and our ballooning debt and deficit. And people say, what have you done about that over the last 10 years? There was actually a piece of the Affordable Care Act, repeal and replace. It was reforming Medicaid that would have saved over it would have funded Medicaid at an appropriate level, but got a handle on the growth and some of the accounting things that states do to try to bring down federal dollars. That would have saved over $880 billion over 10 years. In the federal government, that's real money. It's a real money everywhere, but it certainly is real money in trying to get a handle on our deficit. And so that died by one vote in the US Senate, and so there'll be opportunity to do that again. And so I want to be there because if we can reform Medicaid where it works for people, but in a way that gives states flexibility and saves close to $1 trillion over 10 years for our future generation, I think that's something worth going back and fighting for.
Congressman, of course, you probably have a better overview of all the congressional races and the tight ones. I mean, we hear the pundits talk all the time. Do you see a blue wave coming in November, possibly?
Well, I think that Republicans, if you just want to talk politics of it, need to be more motivated to make sure that if some districts that voted for President Trump, 16 to 20% now have, if you look at some polling, see that it's close before, because Republicans are saying, like, they say, what you get is Republicans going, well, we had a Republican House and Senate, and quite honestly, Fox enjoys picking on Senator McConnell and Paul Ryan, because if they don't agree with something that happened, they don't want to pick on President Trump because their base doesn't. I mean, their viewership doesn't want them to do that, and so people are frustrated. And I look back and I say, Republican government matters to people. If you believe in Medicare for all, which would destroy Medicare for older people, but if you believe in government-run health care, that we shouldn't be doing some of the things we're doing and trying to get Europe to pay more for their money, I mean, you know who your candidate is. But so what did people say? What did we get for Republican House, Republican Senate? We got the economy that's growing because we undid regulations under the previous administration. The president appointed people that didn't put new regulations moving forward, but the Congress had to undo them. We got a tax bill that went 35% to 21% for corporate America. People say that's a giveaway to corporate America. Well, they're spending the money, investing it, growing their businesses. We have an over 4% GDP growth. We have more jobs than people looking for them. We're currently trying to reform the food stamp system, or SNAP, where able-bodied people 18 to 59, not the elderly, not the disabled, but people 18 to 59 that can work at working age should work. Those are the kind of things we're trying to do, and I think we've accomplished a lot. The president looks like he's got NAFTA renegotiated with better terms for America. Now we're focusing on China. So it does make a difference who's in Washington, D.C., and not getting up and voting isn't the answer to try to solve those problems. So the blue wave, if the people who likes what's happening in D.C. don't get up and say we want to continue it for 2 more years, then you will have a blue wave.
All right, well, Congressman, I want to thank you for taking time to stop in.
It was great to be here.
Always enjoy our conversations.
Thank you. I enjoy it very much, too.
All right, for WBRT, I'm Jim Brooks, and thank you again, Congressman.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.